Alexander Graham Bell created the first practical telephone and founded AT&T in 1885. AT&T is the world's largest communications company by revenue. Its revenue is $168.86 billion and it has over 203,000 employees. Apart from the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell also invented a metal detector. In 1881, US President James Garfield was shot, and for doctors, finding a bullet was not easy. Bell created the device to detect the bullet. The invention of the metal detector was widely used in world wars. The telephone is one of the most important inventions which transformed the 20th century. Through this invention, you can hear your loved one from thousands of miles apart. Interestingly, Alexander Graham Bell's mother and wife both were deaf. And maybe that was the reason which made him realize that hearing voices, even though it was far from important at the time, is a very fascinating thing in life. Want to know how Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone and played an important role to make it common through his telecommunications company AT&T? Watch the full video. We at Business Chronicles tell the stories of extraordinary successful people. Please subscribe to our channel to help us in making more videos. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, Scotland on March 3, 1847, and he's mainly remembered today as the inventor of the telephone. He was the son of Alexander Melville Bell, who taught elocution to the deaf, and Eliza Grace Simmons, who was herself almost deaf, which helps to explain his own choice to teach deaf people later on. At the age of 11, Alexander attended the Royal High School at Edinburgh, and during the same year he acquired the middle name Graham. He didn't like the school curriculum and left at the age of 15. The family moved to London in 1865, and in June 1868, Alexander passed the entrance exams for University College London, enrolling that autumn. But the family moved again in 1870, so he was unable to complete his education there. His younger brother Edward died in 1867, and his older brother Melville died in 1870, both of them succumbing to tuberculosis. These tragedies prompted the family's move to Brantford, Ontario, Canada in 1870. The following year, Alexander moved to Boston, where he taught at the Boston School for Deaf Mutes and went on to teach at 2 other schools in Connecticut and Massachusetts. While working at the Clark School for the Deaf in Northampton, Massachusetts, Bell met pupil Mabel Hubbard in 1873 when she was just 15. Mabel was the daughter of one of the school's founders, and despite a 10-year age gap, they fell in love and were married on July 11, 1877. Although Bell worked as a teacher, he also became interested in researching ways to transmit multiple telegraph messages at the same time over a single wire. The Western Union Telegraph Company had bought Joseph Stern's duplex invention, which could transmit messages over one wire simultaneously, and then they'd hired Thomas Edison to come up with further innovations and hopefully corner the market. He duly devised the quadruplex, which could transmit 4 signals at once, and the race was on to add even more message channels to one telegraph wire. Bell and his rival Elijah Gray both came up with designs for 10 or more channels on one telegraph line. They were called harmonic telegraphs, and they relied on tuning forks or reeds that responded to certain frequencies. Unfortunately, they proved to be unreliable in everyday use. Gardner Hubbard led an investment group intent on establishing a federally chartered telegraph company that would compete against Western Union. It would work with the post office to send cheap telegrams. He saw potential in Bell's experiments, but wanted to transmit speech rather than just Morse taps. In the end, he agreed that Bell could work on both. On February 14, 1876, Alexander filed his patent that described a method of sound transmission, beating his competitor Gray by a matter of hours. The Patent Office granted Bell his patent on March 7th, which some have described as the most valuable in history. The patent was secure, but Bell still had to create a working telephone, and he did this soon after. Summoning his laboratory assistant with the words, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." On March 10, 1876, Bell conducted the first ever telephone call. He spent the next few months refining it and demonstrated it at the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition, and in August, he received the inaugural one-way long-distance phone call from Brantford to Paris, Ontario. In July 1877, Hubbard set up the Bell Telephone Company to sell his invention. Bell worked as a technical advisor until the early 1880s when he lost interest in telephony. Although his stock holdings made him rich, he sold most of them before they would realize their highest value. By the mid-1880s, Bell's interest moved on to sound recording and playback. Edison's phonograph invention of 1877 recorded and played back audio using a rotating cylinder covered in tinfoil, but it was an unwieldy and unreliable device. In 1880, Bell was awarded the Volta Prize by the French government in recognition of his achievements in electrical science. He used the prize money to build his Volta laboratory in Washington, D.C., which was dedicated to the study of deafness and helping deaf people. But at the same time, he also focused on improving the phonograph. By 1885, Bell, along with the inventor Charles Sumner Tainter and his cousin Chichester A. Bell, had come up with a commercially viable design which consisted of a removable cardboard tube with a mineral wax coating. They dubbed it the Graphophone and were granted patents for the device in 1886. They formed the Volta Graphophone Company to manufacture it and sold their patents in 1887 to the American Graphophone Company, which eventually became the Columbia Phonograph Company. Bell gave the money he made from the sale to the Volta Laboratory. This wasn't his only success at the Volta Laboratory. In 1880, he started research into the use of light to transmit sound, eventually culminating in an invention called the Photophone. Although it was never made commercially available, it did make important contributions to researching the photovoltaic effects which underpin solar panel technology. Bell also came up with an early version of metal detection. When US President James Garfield was shot in July 1881, surgeons couldn't locate the bullet that was lodged in his back. Bell had previously researched the canceling out of electrical interference on telephone wires using an induction balance that would produce a tone when it came close to a metal object. He was unable to save Garfield, but later provided a successful demonstration of his bullet probe to doctors. It saw use during the Boer War, from 1899 to 1902, and World War I, from 1914 to 1918, where it saved many lives. Bell's endless thirst for knowledge next took in the direction of powered flight. He began experimenting with propeller designs and wing shapes in 1891, which the American scientist Samuel Pierpont Langley had been researching. Wilbur and Orville Wright may have made the first successful powered flight in 1903, but Bell continued his research. He set up the Aerial Experiment Association in 1907, which achieved great progress in the control and design of aircraft and helped the career of aviation pioneer Glenn Hammond Curtis. Bell demonstrated a lifelong commitment to the advancement of scientific knowledge. Although he achieved some degree of wealth, that was never his primary motivation. He gave support to the journal Science, which went on to become the American Association for the Advancement of Science's official publication. He also followed his father-in-law, Gardiner Hubbard, as the National Geographic Society's president from 1898 to 1903. His son-in-law, Gilbert H. Grosvenor, was appointed National Geographic Magazine's editor-in-chief in 1903, and Bell encouraged him to add more photographs and reduce the number of academic articles to make it more approachable for the general public. Bell died on August 2, 1922, at his Nova Scotia estate, where he was also buried. Alexander Graham Bell was born into a reputable family. His father, Alexander Melville Bell, was a notable linguist and researcher. He was the creator of visible speech. Graham Bell, from the very beginning, saw his father working on speech, which helped him to build a foundation at a very early stage. Graham Bell carried on his father's work and invented the telephone, which is one of the world's most important inventions of all time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this.